The promo. It is one of the most essential parts of professional wrestling. Some might say more important than the actual wrestling itself. Throughout wrestling history, there have been a ton of amazing talkers, and I wanted to do a countdown to celebrate those guys, but I knew I couldn't do it alone. So a few months ago, I went on Facebook and Twitter and asked you, the Regretters, to vote for your favorite all-time promo guys. However, once I did that, I realized I backed myself into a corner. See, by just narrowing it down to the top 8 of all time, I would be shutting out tons of deserving iconic promo masters in wrestling, and the last thing I need is more reason for people to hate me. So this week we're doing 2 different countdowns, the best talkers from the 70s to the mid-90s, and the best talkers from the mid-90s onward. And of course, all of these entries were picked by you, the fans. Let's start with the legends. Number 8, Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan might not have been the best wrestler in the world, but aside from his look, there was a reason he was the flag bearer for the WWF for more than 10 years, because he could talk people into the building like no other. Hogan had an oratory style that could only be matched by the Ultimate Warrior. But in my opinion, the one thing that puts Hogan above Warrior in terms of promo ability is the fact that Hogan could tell a coherent story when he talked. He still spoke in grand hyperbole, but he spoke with a kind of conviction that made it work. Hogan delivered his promos in such a way that people could get behind him, but unfortunately he never really had all that much to say, which explains why he began to get stale in the 90s. Nevertheless, it's an iconic promo style that's been emulated, duplicated, and parodied over the years. But as you all know, there's only one guy who can talk like Hulk Hogan. Number 7, Jim Cornette. Jim Cornette has a way of talking that just can't be matched. And believe me, I've tried.
Thank you, fuck you, bye. My CD, that is.
For decades, the Louisville Lip would talk a mile a minute when hyping up the Midnight Express, the Fantastics, the Heavenly Bodies, and scores of others. Even though he would pester audiences and opponents alike, he was still able to put the good guys over.
Dusty Rhodes, I think what you are is a big, ugly, low-class redneck goose. But you've been the world heavyweight champion 3 different times. You are the United States heavyweight champion.
And man, was he a pest when he talked. Always speaking in a high register, always screaming, and stopping only to breathe. Despite all that, he carried a certain air of authority in his promos, even as a young man in the NWA. Jim Cornette didn't need a megaphone like Jimmy Hart. Cornette was the megaphone. People wanted to see him get destroyed, which means he was doing his job. A mama's boy with a punchable face, Jim Cornette could talk up ticket sales and get the fans riled up and begging for more. Number 6, Bobby Heenan. Considered one of the best wrestling managers of all time, the Brain backed that claim up by being one of the best on the microphone. Bobby Heenan was able to articulately explain why fans needed to come and see his wrestlers, of which there were several over the years. He was unabashedly devious, laying out his plans for everyone to see. He was an unbelievably honest character when talking about himself, his wrestlers, their opponents, you name it, but it was always with a degree of venom.
You think you can beat him, dummy? It can't be done.
Personally, I love the way Heenan would spin any negative about himself or one of his clients and turn it into something negative about Hulk Hogan or whatever their do-gooder they were fighting at the time. He spoke with such confidence and conviction, you almost believed him. And of course, who could forget his time as color commentator? Heenan was the man when announcing in WCW, but he is even better when paired with Gorilla Monsoon in the WWF.
That little youngster right there is going to have some nightmares.
He shouldn't sit that close to Mike McGurk. That'll scare any kid.
Will you stop?
Bobby Heenan, whether he was at ringside or the announce table, when he talked, you couldn't help but listen. Number 5, Randy Savage. This might be a bold claim, but I would argue that in the 1980s, the Macho Man was a much more culturally relevant wrestler than Hulk Hogan was, even though Hogan was the bigger star. Why is that, you might ask? It's simple. The voice. Randy Savage gets a lot of points in this countdown simply because of that unmistakable, trademark gravelly voice. You may not have always known what he was talking about in his promos, but he spoke in a way that demanded your attention.
Then the Macho Man Randy Savage. On balance, off balance, doesn't matter. I'm better than you are, yeah.
Randy spoke in a steady stream of consciousness that bounced from one thought to another, peppering in all kinds of analogies. For all the insanity that came out of his mouth, Randy was actually one of the most intelligent promo guys of all time.
Things are starting to cultivate, things are starting to grow.
Between he and Hogan, Randy's was the voice that kids in the playground would imitate more just because it was so unique. He also had the simpler catchphrase, and the voice was associated with far more successful endorsement deals. And if you think I'm full of it, Thunder Mixer? Slim Jim. Case closed. The true voice of a generation of wrestling fans, Savage's promos were bizarre, outlandish, impactful, and memorable. Just like the guy himself.
Snap into it, yeah!
See, I'm telling you, it's just more fun to do. Number 4, Jake Roberts. Full disclosure, Jake Roberts is the reason I split this list into 2 countdowns in the first place. Because if I just went on overall votes for all eras, this man wouldn't have cracked the top 8, and that would have been a damn tragedy. In his prime, Jake the Snake Roberts was a wrestling anomaly in every sense of the word. He didn't have a stellar physique, he didn't have movie star looks, and his promo style was unlike anyone else's at the time. In an era when wrestling promos were just a game of who can scream the loudest, Roberts' voice was low and hushed, yet it was never tired or lazy. He came at you on the microphone with Hogan-like intensity, though with the decibel level turned down to its lowest. He spoke with intelligence, with finesse.
The light in the window is yet but a crack in the sky, a stairway to darkness in the blink of an eye. A levy of tears to know that neither one of you will be coming back.
And just when he lured you in with his calm demeanor and his words that bordered on poetic, only then would the Snake strike with the true venom as he finally raised his voice.
You humbled them and you humiliated them. Well, now it's my turn. I'm going to make you beg, DiBiase.
Ultimately, Roberts was a man of few words. His promos never lasted that long. That's because he never wasted his words. They were part and parcel with the man himself. The psychology in his microphone work was like no other. It's a style that others have tried to emulate ever since.
Longfellow couldn't have said it better.
Number 3. Ric Flair. Ric Flair was simply the man. He could wrestle, he could work, he could sell, and most important of all, he could talk. Throughout his career, Ric Flair bragged about being the best. He boasted about his wealth, his possessions, his status, his gold, and his wrestling ability. The complete opposite of humble, Flair walked the walk and talked the talk, and the fans ate it up for decades. He was the guy other men wanted to be, and the guy that women wanted to be with. Whether he was a good guy or a bad guy, Flair would cut a promo, and the fans would either come to see him win or come to see him lose. Either way, it was a great night for local promoters. Ric Flair represents the ideal of what the cocky wrestling heel archetype should be. Supremely confident, unapologetic, and in your face. His is the template that was followed by millions of wrestlers afterward, and you could even argue laid the foundation for today's hip-hop scene. Simply put, Ric Flair is one of the best to ever lace up a pair of boots or hold a microphone. Number 2. Dusty Rhodes. If Ric Flair is the yin, then Dusty Rhodes is the yang in terms of overall presentation and how to cut a promo. Sting might go down as Ric Flair's biggest rival, but for my money, his feud with Dusty should be considered as well because of what it represented. The common man versus the man. Poor versus rich. Have not versus have. Obviously, Dusty fought more people than just Ric Flair, but this rivalry is the best example of what Rhodes could do on the mic. You believe that everything Dusty said came from the bottom of his heart, like he lived and died on every word. It might be cliche, but just watch his Hard Times promo, and you'll know how Dusty was able to connect with his fans on a level that's only been matched by a handful of people ever since.
My belly's just a little big, my honey's just a little big, but brother, I am bad and they know I'm bad.
Dusty could make you laugh, make you cry, he could rhyme and rap, he could play the people like a fiddle and bring them to the show in droves. Dusty could do it all, a legend befitting the American dream. Now it's time for my honorable mention, someone who didn't get a lot of fan votes in the polls, but in my opinion absolutely deserves to be on this list. Jerry Lawler. Seriously, how did almost none of you vote for Lawler in this poll? This has to be the biggest indicator of the average age of my fan base because older fans would know Jerry Lawler was the man. Fans who've grown up on Jerry Lawler's commentary in WWE might not be aware of just how awesome on the microphone he really was in his prime. Memphis in the 70s and 80s was full of great talkers like Bill Dundee, Austin Idol, and Jackie Fargo, but Lawler was truly the king among all of them. He spoke with a quick tongue and was ready to assault his opponents with a bevy of zingers. He said he was the best, he knew he was the best, and as a fan, you believed he was the best.
Jarrett knows that if I was the world's heavyweight champion, I'd have to leave here, and he could see his little candy castle come crumbling down, baby.
One of Jerry's best strengths was the fact he could switch back and forth from face to heel with relative ease, and get the crowd to go with or against him in a flash. It's a skill that not everyone has, and Jerry had it in spades. And it's not as if Lawler slowed down with age.
Kid, I'm the king of the pile drivers. If you don't believe it, get yourself a shovel and a flashlight and go dig up Andy Kaufman and ask him what happened when I pile drived him.
So kids, do yourself a favor. After you're watching this video, go to the search bar and look up Jerry Lawler in Memphis. You'll be glad you did. And the number 1 legendary talker as voted by the fans is Roddy Piper. The Hot Rod was a great big ball of unscripted chaos, both in the ring and on the microphone. When he was cutting a promo, you never quite knew where he was going to go next. And frankly, it's a safe bet he didn't know either.
I have too much pride to quit because I'm a real man. Snooker doesn't quit because he's stupid.
Roddy Piper's promos always followed the same basic formula. Grab the microphone, say whatever's on your mind, no matter how irrelevant the anecdote or analogy may be to the situation, tie everything back to the match or opponent at hand, magic.
I can stand here and I can be black. Beat it, beat it, beat it.
Piper was a troublemaker, a shit stirrer. To borrow a phrase from Charlie Murphy, he was a habitual line stepper. Piper knew how to push the buttons of every fan in attendance with his wild banter. But even though he was capable of setting off World War III on the microphone, he could back up everything he said in the ring. He verbally dressed down his opponents, then physically beat them down afterward. Piper is also credited for revolutionizing the whole talk show portion of wrestling events with Piper's Pit. Instead of cutting promos on the camera, he would do the same thing to his guests. Every talk show that's ever come since Piper's Pit has failed to live up to the lofty standards set by the Hot Scott all those years ago. As good as the hosts have been at talking, none can hold a candle to what Piper could do. That total originality, that intensity, and that ability to captivate audiences the world over is why the fans have voted Roddy Piper as the best legendary talker. Let me know who from this era you think deserves to be in this countdown in the comments section below. And tune in on Thursday when I reveal the best talkers from the mid-90s to today as voted on by you, the fans. Be sure to thumbs up this video if you like it, subscribe to Wrestling with Regret, and buy the t-shirts at ProWrestlingTees.com. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.